Okay, thanks for joining us here this evening, and we are glad you're joining us for Bible study. We're just about ready to start here. We're using a new source for our video and audio, so hopefully everything goes well tonight. And if there's something that you feel that you'd like to, if it's not loud enough or whatever, we'll get to it. But thanks for all of you that are joining us right now. Hi, Betty. Hi, Carol. Hi, Jeannie. And we're going to wait here and make sure Facebook joins us here in just a few minutes, and then we'll be underway. And there they are. All right. So we're all online now, and we're going to look at this evening Simon and Mary, and that's from John chapter 12. And then as soon as we're done with Simon and Mary, we're going to go to the Canaanite woman. That's Matthew 15. And there's verses there. There's only one verse actually for this one. And so we'll get to that here. We'll wait till the top of the hour. Again, hi Betty. Welcome. Hopefully it's sounding okay. And again, we say hi to Carol and hi to Jeannie. And we'll be getting underway. Those of you on Facebook, there's a few over there. We welcome you joining us tonight. Okay. All right, let's get underway here this evening. And again, we're going to start off with John chapter 12, verse 3. There's only one verse that we're going to talk about when we talk about Simon and Mary. And of course, Mary was the Mary that put the expensive perfume on Jesus's feet. And then Simon, we're going to talk a little bit more about him. So here's John 12, verse 3. Then Mary took a pound of very costly perfume, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Now, Max Lucado, and of course we're using the book Max Lucado, They Walked with God, and this is what he says about that verse. Artful Eddie lacked nothing. He was the slickest of the slick lawyers, a crony of Al Capone. In fact, he ran the gangsters' dog tracks, and he mastered the simple technique of being able to fix the race by overfeeding 7 dogs, and then he bet on the 8th. Wealth, status, style, artful Eddie lacked nothing. But he turned himself in, and he squealed on Al Capone. And what was his motive? His motive was his son. Eddie had spent his life with the despicable, and for his son, he wanted more. He wanted to give his son a name that meant he would have to clear his own. But to do that, he'd have to clear his own name. And Eddie was willing to take a risk so that his son could have a clean slate. And after Eddie squealed, the mob remembered, and sadly, they silenced artful Eddie using a shotgun. Was it worth it? Well, for Eddie's son it was, because artful Eddie's boy lived up to the sacrifice. In fact, his is one of the best known names in the world. But before we talk about artful Eddie's son, let's talk about the principle, risky love. So you see, love that takes a chance, love that makes a statement and leaves a legacy, a sacrificial love, an act of love that is never forgotten. Now, such an act of love was seen in the last week of the life of Jesus. A demonstration of devotion that the world will never forget. An act of extravagant tenderness in which Jesus wasn't the giver, but he was the receiver. A cluster of friends encircle Jesus. They are at the table. The city is Bethany, and the house is Simon's. He was known as Simon the leper. Now, we don't know when Jesus healed him, but we do know what he was like before Jesus healed him. Stooped shoulders, a fingerless hand, scabbed arm, infected back, draped in rags, a tattered wrap that hides all of the face except for his wide eyes. But that was before Jesus' touch. Was Simon the one Jesus healed after he delivered the Sermon on the Mount? Was he the one in the 10 who returned to say thank you? Was he one of the 4,000 Jesus helped in Bethsaida? Or was he one of the nameless myriads the gospel writers didn't take time to mention? We don't know. But we do know he had Jesus and his disciples over for dinner. A simple act, but it must have meant a lot to Jesus. And Simon didn't forget what Jesus had done. Where there had been a nub, there was now a finger for his daughter to hold. Where there had been ulcerous sores, there was now skin. And where there had been lonely hours in quarantine, there were now happy hours such as this, a house full of friends, a table full of food. Simon knew what it was like to stare death in the face. He knew what it was like to have no home to call your own, and he knew what it was like to be misunderstood. He wanted Jesus to know that if he ever needed a meal and a place to lay his head, there was one house in Bethany in which he could go. Other homes would not be as gracious as Simon's. In fact, before the week is up, Jesus will spend some time in the high priest's house, probably the nicest house in Jerusalem. 3 barns in the back, a beautiful view of the valley, but Jesus won't see the view. He'll see only the false witnesses, he'll hear the lies, he'll feel the slaps on his face. Before the week is up, Jesus will visit the chambers of Herod, elegant chambers, plenty of servants. Perhaps there was probably fruit and wine on the table, but Herod won't offer any to Jesus. Herod just wants to have Jesus show him a miracle. The guards will probably laugh at Jesus. Before the week is up, Jesus will visit the home of Pilate. Rare opportunity to stand before the couch of the procurator of all Israel. Should be a moment to remember, but it won't be. It's a moment the world would rather forget. Pilate has an opportunity to perform the world's greatest act of mercy, and he doesn't. God is in his house, and Pilate doesn't see him. But what if Pilate had come to the defense of the innocent? What if Herod had asked Jesus for help? What if the high priest has been as concerned with truth as he was his position? What if one of them had turned his back on the crowd and his face toward Jesus and made a stand? Simon did. Risky love seizes the moment. He gave Jesus a good meal, not much, but more than most. And when the priest accused and the soldier slapped, perhaps Jesus remembered what Simon did, and it gave him strength. And when he remembered Simon's meal, perhaps he remembered Mary's gesture. She was the only one who believed him. Whenever he spoke of his death, the others shrugged, the others doubted, but Mary believed. Mary believed because he spoke with the firmness she had heard before. Lazarus, come out. And her brother came out. In fact, after 4 days, he came out of a stone-sealed grave. And as Mary kissed the now warm hands of her just-dead brother, she turned and looked, and Jesus was smiling. Tear streaks were dry, and the teeth shone from beneath the beard. He was smiling, and in her heart, she knew she would never doubt his words. So when he spoke of his death, he believed. And when she saw the 3 together, she couldn't resist. Simon, the healed leper, head back thrown in laughter. Lazarus, the resurrected corpse, leaning in to see what Jesus had said. And Jesus, the source of life for both, beginning his joke a second time. Now is the right time, she told herself. It wasn't an active impulse. She had carried this large vial of perfume from her house to Simon's. It wasn't a spontaneous gesture, but it was an extravagant one. The perfume was worth a year's wages. It wasn't a logical thing to do, but since when has love been led by logic? Logic hadn't touched Simon. Common sense hadn't wept at Lazarus' tomb. Practicality didn't feed the crowds or love the children. Love did. Extravagant, risky, chance-taking love. And now someone needs to show the same to the giver of such love. So Mary did. She stepped up behind him and stood with the jar in her hand. Within a couple of moments, every mouth was silent and every eye wide as they watched her nervous fingers remove the cover. Only Jesus was unaware of her presence, and just as he noticed everyone looking behind him, she began to pour. The fragrance rushed through the room. Smells of cooked lamb and herbs were lost in the aroma of the sweet ointment. Wherever you go, the gesture spoke, breathe the aroma, and remember the one who cares. On his skin, the fragrance of faith. In his clothing, the balm of belief. Even as the soldiers divided his garments, her gesture brought a bouquet into a cemetery. The other disciples mocked her extravagance. They, the recipients of exorbitant love, chastised her generosity. Why waste that perfume? It could have been sold for a great deal of money that could have been given to the poor. But don't miss Jesus' prompt defense of Mary. Why are you troubling this woman? She did an excellent thing for me. Jesus' message is just as powerful today as it was then, and we should not miss it. There is a time for risky love. There is a time for extravagant gestures. There's a time to pour out your affections on one you love, and when the time comes, seize it. Don't miss it. Some days never come, and the price of practicality is sometimes higher than extravagance, but the rewards of risky love are always greater than its cost. Go to the effort, invest the time, write the letter, make the apology, take the trip, purchase the gift, do it. The seized opportunities will render joy. The neglected will bring regret. The reward was great for Simon. He was privileged to give rest to the one who had made the earth, and Simon's gestures will never be forgotten. And neither will Mary's. Jesus promised, wherever the good news is preached in all the world, what this woman has done will be told, and people will remember her. Simon and Mary, both examples of risky, gift-given love at the right time. Which brings us now back to Artful Eddie, the Chicago mobster who squealed on Al Capone so his son could have a fair chance. Had Eddie lived to see his son Butch grow up, he would have been proud. He would have been proud of Butch's appointment to Annapolis. He would have been proud of the commissioning as a World War II Navy pilot. He would have been proud as he read of his son downing 5 bombers in the Pacific night and saving the lives of hundreds of crewmen on the carrier Lexington. Yeah, the name was cleared. The Congressional Medal of Honor was given to Butch, his son. It was received as proof. And you know what? When you hear this name, in fact, it's an airport name in Chicago, O'Hare Airport in Chicago, you don't think of gangsters. You think of an aviation hero, Butch O'Hare. And now when you say his name, you'll have something else to think about. That's a powerful, powerful story about a kind of love, a risky love, and a risky love that Artful Eddie did so his son could have a life. A risky love that Simon and both Mary did so Jesus could have a moment of peace and a moment of friendship and a moment of a symbol of Jesus's being, anointed before his death. So what a great story, and again, something we can learn so much from. And our final one tonight is the Canaanite woman, and it is in Matthew 15, and there's 7 verses, 21 through 28 are the ones that we can look at here this evening. So let's take a look at Matthew 15, 21 through 28. And now leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." Now Jesus did not answer a word, so his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. And the woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help me, she said. He replied, It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Yes, it is, Lord, she said. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. And then Jesus said to her, Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed at that moment. Now we don't know, now this is again Max's thoughts. We don't know a thing about her. We don't know her name, her background, her looks, her hometown. She came from nowhere and went nowhere. She disappeared the same way that she appeared, like a puff of smoke. But what a delightful puff she was. The disciples, during 2 years of training, hadn't done what she did in a few moments of conversing. She impressed Jesus with her faith. The disciples' hearts may have been good, their desire may have been sincere, but their faith didn't turn God's head. Hers did. And for all we don't know about her, we do know one remarkable truth. She impressed God with her faith. And after that, anything else she ever did was insignificant. Woman, you have great faith, Jesus stated. Some statement, especially when you consider God said it. The God who can put a handful of galaxies into his palm. The one who creates Everests as a hobby. The one who paints rainbows without a canvas. The one who can measure the thickness of mosquito wings with one hand and level a mountain with the other. One would think that the Creator would not be easily impressed. But something about this woman brought a sparkle to his eyes, most likely a smile to his face. Matthew calls her a Canaanite woman, and in doing so, called strikes 1 and 2. Strike 1, a Canaanite, an outsider, a foreigner, an apple in a family tree of oranges. Strike 2, a woman. Might as well have been a junkyard dog. She lived in a culture that had little respect for women. But she met the teacher who had plenty of respect for her. Oh, it doesn't appear that way. In fact, the dialogue between the two seems kind of harsh. And it's not an easy passage to understand unless you're willing to concede that Jesus knew how to smile. If you have trouble with the sketch of the smiling Jesus, well, you're going to have trouble with this story. But if you don't, if the thought of God smiling brings you a bit of relief, then you're going to like the next few paragraphs. Here's Max Lucado's interpretation. The woman is desperate. Her daughter is demon-possessed. The Canaanite woman has no right to ask anything of Jesus. She's not a Jewish person. She's not a disciple. She doesn't offer money for the ministry. She makes no promise to devote herself to following Jesus. You get the impression that she knows as well as anybody that Jesus doesn't owe her anything, and yet she's asking him for everything. But that doesn't slow her down. She persists in her plea, have mercy on me. Matthew notes that Jesus says nothing at first, nothing. He doesn't even open his mouth. And why is that? To test her? Most commentators suggest this. Maybe they say he's waiting to see how serious she is about her plea. Max Lucado said his dad used to make him wait a week from the day he asked him for something to the day he gave me his answer. And most of the time, I would forget that I ever made that request. Time has a way of separating whims from needs, so maybe that's what Jesus was doing. But Max has another opinion. I think that he was admiring her. I think that it did his heart good to see some spunky faith for a change. I think that it refreshed him to see someone asking him to do the very thing he came to do, give great gifts to unworthy children. And how strange that we don't allow him to do it more often for us. Perhaps the most amazing response to God's gift is our reluctance to accept that gift. Oh, we want it, but on our terms, and for some odd reason, we feel better if we earn it. So we create religious hoops and hop through them, making God a trainer, us his pets, and religion a complete circus. The Canaanite woman knew better. She had no resume. She claimed no heritage. She had no degrees. She knew only two things. Her daughter was weak, and Jesus was strong. The disciples are annoyed as Jesus sits in silence. They grow smugger. Send her away, they demanded. The spotlight is put on Jesus. He looks at the disciples, and then he looks at the woman. And what follows is one of the most intriguing dialogues in the New Testament. I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel, he says. Lord, help me. It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dog, he answers. But even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table, she responds. Now, is Jesus being rude? Is he worn out? Is he frustrated? I mean, how do we explain this dialogue? Well, there's Bible commentaries that give us three options. Some say that Jesus was trapped. He could not help the woman because he had been sent first to the lost sheep of Israel. Now, that might be a great theory, but it has a lot of problems. One is the Samaritan woman who helped, the centurion that he helped. You see, he had already helped Gentiles, and he stayed faithful to the focus in his mission, so that's not it. Others think that Jesus was rude. I mean, who can blame him? He was tired. It had been a long trip. The disciples were coming along slowly, and this request was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, don't like that explanation either, because the one who had compassion on the 5,000 people, the one who had wept over the city of Jerusalem, the one who had come to seek and save ones like this one, I don't think that he would snap so abruptly at such a needy woman. Now, the most popular theory is that he was testing her, just to be sure that she was serious about her request, just to make sure that her faith was real. But by insinuating that she was a dog, and I don't think Jesus would do that either. So Max comes up with another alternative. Could it be that Jesus' tongue is kind of poking his cheek? Could it be that he and the woman are engaging in satirical banter? I mean, it's a wry exchange in which God's unlimited grace is being highlighted. Could Jesus be so delighted to have found someone who is not bartering with the religious system or proud of a heritage that he just can't resist a little bit of humor here? And he knows he can heal her daughter. He knows he isn't bound by a plan. He knows her heart is good. So he decides to engage in this humorous moment with a faithful woman. In essence, this is what Max believes this is what's said. Now, you know that God only cares about Jewish people, he says, smiling. And then she catches on and she volleys back, but your bread is so precious, I'll be happy to eat the crumbs. And in a spirit of exuberance, he bursts out, never have I seen such faith, your daughter is healed. You see, this story does not portray a contemptuous God. It portrays a willing one who delights in a sincere seeker. And we should be glad he does. Because this story is told about the time Napoleon's steed got away from him. And an alert private jumped on his own horse and chased down Napoleon's horse. And when he presented the reins of the animal to Napoleon, the ruler took them, smiled at this willing private, and said, "Thank you, Captain." The soldier's eyes widened at what he had heard. He then straightened, saluted, and snapped, "Thank you, sir." And he went right to the barracks, got his bag, moved into the officer's quarters, took his old uniform to the quartermaster and exchanged it for that of a captain. By the emperor's word, he had become a private turned commissioned officer. And he didn't argue. He didn't shrug. He didn't doubt. He knew that the one who had the power to do it had done it, and he accepted that. If only we would do the same. If only we would have the faith of the private and the trust of the Canaanite woman. If only when God smiles and says we are saved, we'd salute him, thank him, and live like those who have just received a gift from the commander-in-chief himself. And we seldom do that, though. We prefer to get salvation the old-fashioned way. We want to earn it. To accept grace sometimes is to admit failure, and that's a step we're hesitant to take. So we opt to impress God with how good we are rather than confessing how great he is. We dizzy ourselves with doctrine. We burden ourselves with rules. We think that God will smile on our efforts, but he doesn't. You see, God's smile is not for the healthy hiker who boasts that he made the journey alone. It is instead for the crippled leper who begs God for a back on which to ride. Such were the woman's words. She knew that her request was ludicrous, but she also knew that Jesus was Lord. Daniel's words could have been hers. We do not make requests of you because we are righteous, but because of your great mercy. And she came, banking on the hope that Jesus would answer her prayers based on his goodness and not her worthiness. And he did, with a smile. When I think about the prayers that God has answered for all of us, despite the lives we've lived, I'm sure he's got to be smiling. And that's why we should keep the picture of Jesus smiling hanging up on our walls. Again, powerful story. So much truth to the fact that we work so hard to earn God's love when God offers us salvation freely. And it's an easy thing to believe in his Son, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's all he asks. So next week we will talk about the crippled man at the gate. That's Acts chapter 3. And then we'll also talk about the Gadarene demoniac, and you'll read that in Mark 5. Okay, so chapter 5 of Mark, and also chapter 3 of Acts. That'll be next week's Bible study. We'll be with you again next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central Time, 6 o'clock Mountain Time on our website, and also on Facebook. So 2 ways to join us every Wednesday night, or you can meet with us in person Wednesday mornings, 9 o'clock Mountain Time, 10 o'clock Central Time at the Paxton United Methodist Church. So we hope you enjoyed tonight's Bible studies of those 2 characters. We'll continue to go on through Max Lucado's book until we're done. And we're getting closer and closer. Again, we thank you for joining us this evening. Prayers for all of you. We ask that, of course, that God be with all of us, those who are hurting, those who are struggling, and that God lead us to them so that we may share them that risky love and show them the faith that we should easily be able to share with others. We do all of that in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Have yourself a wonderful